after that feisty debate last night, we got a stellar team ready to break it all down with us.
That is right. The literal super panel. It features many great friends of the show. Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute, Rachel Bovard. Journalist, Zed Jelani. Democratic strategist, Andrew Feldman. Democratic strategist and renewed member of the all-star panel,
That's right.
Don Calloway.
Welcome back, Don.
Thank you.
We are very glad
The
to
audience
have you.
missed you, I can tell you that. All right, so we had a spirited debate last night. I think the number one story of the night was about Michael Bloomberg. We've covered Bloomberg's kind of implosion when it came to that the Elizabeth Warren attack on the women and NDAs. But more significant, I thought, was the fact that he didn't have a coherent answer when it came to stop and frisk. Let's take a listen to that last night.
Well, if I go back and look at my time in office, the one thing that I'm really worried about, embarrassed about, was how it turned out with stop and frisk. When I got into office, there were 650 murders a year in New York City. And I thought that my first responsibility was to give people the right to live. That's the basic right of everything. And we adopted a policy which had been in place, the policy that all big police departments use of stop and frisk. What happened, however, was it got out of control. And when I discovered that we were doing too many stop and frisks, we cut 95% of it out. And I've sat down with a bunch of African-American clergy and business people to talk about this, to try to learn. I've talked to a number of kids who'd been stopped. And I was trying to understand how we change our policies so we can keep the city safe, because the crime rate did go from 50% down to 300. And we have to keep the lid on crime, but we cannot go out and stop people indiscriminately.
Mayor, thank you. Let me go to Vice President.
Well, Don, you can see there, I mean, a bumbling answer. He didn't know what he was doing. He said he was embarrassed. I'm not sure if that was included in the clip or not. I mean, but overall, he was not ready for that answer.
He wasn't, but which is kind of ill preparation on his part. You know, you got the money to buy debate prep.
Right. Yeah. You knew this was coming.
Yeah. And in the end, if you listen, he still came around to, but crime went down. There are ways to reduce crime, community policing, community accountability standards, things and so on and so forth.
Well, and crime has continued to go down since stop
across
and frisk
the board.
ended.
Right.
So there you go.
Exactly. I mean, he caught a beat down. Now, it's easy to look bad when the entire panel is beating up on you. So I will give him some credit for that. That said, he did look woefully unprepared. I'm a big boxing guy, so I believe that a thing called ring rust is real. Yeah. And he really hasn't been in there.
He hasn't been there for 11 years.
Right. First of all, nobody's been under these kind of lights. This is a different stage than anything else. But secondly, if you haven't been in that arena for a long time, he definitely could have gotten a lot better prepared.
Zed, this is something you've been bringing up, which is that for the last 11 years, he's basically been feted at Davos. He's been going to Wall Street conferences. They're like, everybody's bowing down before
I think
Lord.
the term is oligarch.
Oligarch, yeah, okay. Oh, we're not allowed to say that, actually, Rachel. Sorry, you didn't get the memo. What do you think, Zed? I mean, just generally about his horrific.
I think as mayor of New York, he actually was a very effective debater. I expected him to do much better.
Me too.
But I think there's two factors here. One is he's getting a little bit older, and second is going back to the boxing analogies. He couldn't do a rope-a-dope here.
Yeah.
Last year, he went out and said that if he ran as a Democrat, he'd be embarrassed. He'd be apologizing all the time. They're way more liberal than he is, and that's exactly what he's doing now. He's embarrassed. He's apologizing all the time. He can't defend his record. I think if he actually owned up to what he was and what he did and strongly defended it, he would have come across much better, because sometimes it's better to be strong and wrong than weak and right.
I think
this is what's really tripping him up. And if he wants to turn things around, he's going to have to actually own his record, own his personality, own his political donations, and actually try to make a case for those. Because right now what he's basically saying is, yeah, my 12 years of mayoralty, they were all a mistake. I did a bunch of terrible things. I'm sorry. And it's too late in the race to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is really right, because the bottom line, and Don alluded to this, is he still believes in the practice. I mean, he's still, Andrew, at the end of the day, in that answer doesn't say we shouldn't have done it all. He says we got it out of control, but I had to make sure crime went down. I mean, he still doesn't really see the existential central problem of stop and frisk. And it just makes you feel like the whole thing is disingenuous. It's just a political ploy because he knows that's where he needs to be now that he's a Democrat.
Well, I felt that way with all of his answers, Crystal. I mean, if you look at his answer on the way he has said to treat women, it seems like he still believes in treating women that way too.
He told a joke wrong.
They just didn't like the joke.
A joke. I mean, that was just, beyond awful.
So
and I mean, it is cringeworthy what we saw, but also, you know, he's not able to hide behind his ads like this. I mean, now he will still spend another $400 million, but this was really telling about what kind of person this man is. Because to me, it wasn't just about what he was saying. It was his body language, the way he came off, a true sense of arrogance that even, to me, felt a bit worse than maybe Donald Trump.
It was strange. So, Rachel, I mean, from a purely political perspective, one of the things about Trump that made him Trump was that he would just own so much of what he did.
Right.
Whereas, to Zed's point, it's almost like the antithesis of how you politically should behave. And to just be like, oh, I'm embarrassed. And, I mean, he clammed up. He certainly looked arrogant. His preparation overall was terrible. And I mean, $500 million to pay to get slapped around on the debate stage? I don't know.
He was
immediately regretting it.
Yeah.
But I think the most stunning thing about this is exactly what we've pointed out, which is all of these attacks were knowable. Like he knew they were coming. He should have had better answers, but he looked weak. He was stumbling. No one's disagreed with the guy in 10 years, and you can tell.
Yes, exactly.
And I think, you know, for him to be the savior of the Democrats, right? That's why he's putting himself out there in these ads, and I think people were really waiting to see that. The entire debate was a sad trombone for Michael Bloomberg.
Well, and who does that most benefit? I mean, look, you've got Bernie Sanders looking increasingly alone at the top. Bloomberg was like, he was almost like the fail-safe for the establishment folks who do not want Bernie. They're like, okay, Biden didn't work out. These other people, Pete and Amy and Warren, can't seem to get it together with voters of color. But Bloomberg is coming to save the day. And now, Don, they're waking up to the reality. This guy is not the savior that they were hoping that he would be.
Well, you know, I'm thinking about South Carolina. I've been embedded there for the bulk of the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how many people really paid attention last night. So I would debate
But he's not even on the ballot in South Carolina.
He's not, but I'm thinking about the pragmatic black voter that starts in South Carolina and then goes out into Super Tuesday from there. Does that person really care about what happened last night? Or is this a discussion amongst us? And I don't know that they do. And I think that the power of those ads, that spending, will allow him to not only get his message out, but to control what his message is. So I really worry that he won't walk away from this too bruised, but he did get a beat down.
You are correct.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Zed, one of the things you've been pointing out is about how Bloomberg's Obama ad in particular has been dramatically effective because he's basically put out the thing. People think that Obama has legitimately endorsed Michael Bloomberg because of the ad blitz, and he only renewed now a second ad doing that.
Yeah, I've heard this from people myself, and I believe even Obama's former campaign manager has said someone came up to him on the gym and asked him, you know, why did he endorse? Look, I think Don's making a really serious point here. I think that Bloomberg will take some negative media over the next few days. That'll reach some amount of people. But this man has spent $500 million, and he's ready to spend $500 million more. He especially hasn't really done anything negative so far, right? Nobody has the money to take out Bernie Sanders except for Michael Bloomberg in terms of negative ad spending. And I think he's looking for a pretext this entire time. I think he's going to say, everyone ganged up on me in the debate. The Bernie bros are attacking me on Twitter. I'm just defending myself doing all this. And I think this man's, 77, 78 years old. He needs this presidency. It's the only thing left when you're the 12th richest person in the world is this presidency. And I think
you can buy everything else. Why not?
I think one bad debate, and I think we all agree it was a bad debate, is not going to take him out. I think he's going to escalate his negativity now, and we're going to see what happens.
And Andrew, does he go negative with hundreds of millions of dollars in ads?
Oh, he says he's not going to, but I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, let's see. But the problem is, he has debates every single week or every other week. I mean, this could continue to perpetuate a cycle. I know Zed said that he thought he was a pretty effective debater in New York. I was coming into this hearing that he was actually a pretty poor debater in New York. I think it just depends who you talk to, but this could become a perpetual cycle because of his arrogance, because of his way he talked down to people. His eye rolling was awful. I mean, yes, advertising can turn heads, but at the end of the day, if this becomes a showdown between Bernie and Bloom, as I'm calling him, I'm just not sure that he's going to be able to win over most voters. Just to tell you an example, I had a person text me last night who several weeks ago said he was very intrigued by Bloomberg because we need to beat Trump. The text message last night was, Absolutely not. Yeah. And I said, well, I told you not to be convinced by the ads. And he said he hadn't even focused on the ads. It was the theory, theory of the case.
You know what? I got texts from within his campaign, within Bloomberg's campaign, people who signed up recently who were like, oh boy, this is not go well. And so
the six-figure salary isn't worth it?
Well, I guess it still is. But yeah, I mean, I do think, look, I think Don is right. You can't write him off, but he sustained real damage last night. And that negative media, the positive media cycle has definitively ended. Any sort of white college educated people who are with him are going in another direction. And today, the head-to-head matchup, even before this debate, said that Bernie Sanders would beat him in a head-to-head matchup by 20 points. So that's where we are. All right, guys, stick with us. We want to get to more with Team Rising right after this.